Then once you begin to do that, you begin to get people talking about you. Once they start talking about you, let them move you out to other places. Someone might say, you know, you ought to go to Waco and perform at this event. I know somebody down there. And that's fine if that happens. Start here and let it move out. And I think you're going to see that that it'll work a lot better. And I would also tell you that, you know, a lot of people think that you have to live in certain cities to really, if you're going to pursue a music career. That is no longer true. That really is no longer true. You know, one of the best areas of independent music, and it has been for years, is Omaha, Nebraska. Now, how did that happen? I have no idea. I have no idea. Seattle has a wonderful, a whole group of independent artists up there. It can happen anywhere. Dallas is a great place. There are a lot of us that would like to see things happen in Dallas here, and it's a great place for us. So do it right where you are. Number 4, this is going to be hitting home for some of you a little bit, maybe a little close to home, but I want you to consider whether you need a manager. Managers have in the past taken 15 to 20% of everything you make to manage you. Now, over time, folks, that's a lot of money. That's a whole lot of money. Today, when people start out, they're not making any money. So there are people out there today calling themselves managers. But what they do is they manage a group of artists because the individual artists can't pay them enough to do that. So they manage a group of artists. So you're paying 15 to 20% of your income to be managed by somebody who's really not focusing on you. And so I think there's a better idea, and I've actually seen this out in the marketplace. I think that when you begin to get busy in your career and you feel like I need some help, consider hiring a personal assistant to help you. It's different from a manager in that this person, you could hire them as an independent contractor. They could just simply work on the job, the specific job, or you could hire them as an employee. Either way you hire them, you're going to pay a whole lot less than 15 to 20% of your career. The difference is with a manager, they make the decisions and you do what they say. What I'm suggesting to you is you make the decision and then let the assistant implement what you say. Actually, this is nothing new, and artists do this all the time. Major artists do this all the time. I saw, oh gosh, it's been probably a year ago, I saw a piece on Taylor Swift. It was sort of a documentary kind of thing, a little piece on Taylor Swift. And they were filming some things, and she has quite an enterprise that she has. And you know, she has this persona of being a real airhead, you know, like looking at the audience, can't believe they're all out here and all that. That's just an act. She is a very smart woman. She's a very savvy businesswoman. And in the interview, she had a whole bunch of people around her who were assistants, and they were working on different things. And they would say, well, here's what I came up with. We could do it this way, or this way. And she looked at it, she goes, I like this way. They go, okay, great. And they go off and do it. She was calling the shots to everything. That's what I'm suggesting you do. That's what I'm suggesting that you consider doing. I think the truth is we all know better than anyone else how to make the right decisions for ourselves, but we don't want to make decisions because we think we're going to make a mistake. And so what we do, it's kind of funny, but what we do is we'll go ask other people what they think we should do. You know, how would they know? How could they possibly know? A person did this to me for one time, and just over and over, well, what do you think I should do about this? What do you think I should do about this? Finally, I said, look, I can barely figure out what I should do. How could I possibly know what you should do? So you got to do this yourself. And I think that the ability to make decisions is just critical. I think my mentor taught me, he said, decision making is pretty easy. He said the way you learn to make good decisions is to make a whole lot of bad decisions. And there's nothing wrong with that. And he said, if you make a decision and it's not a good decision, just make another decision. You're not locked in concrete, but make a decision and for sure make the decision. There's another adage that says if you don't make your decisions, somebody else will make them for you. So that's something to consider. But to me, I really don't think that you need a manager. In fact, I'm telling the students that I'm not really convinced as to whether that career is going to exist like it exists now. I think it's going to transform, and it may be part of a record label. It may morph into something like that. The fifth thing that I would suggest to you is consider whether you need a record label behind you. Now, we talked about earlier, that was a must before the turn of the century. You had to have a record label, but what about today? With the lower costs, you really don't need them to do those things. So, as we look at a label, first of all, how does a label make money? How have they made money in the past? What's their function?
Sales.
Sales. What do they sell?
Records.
Records, exactly. Now we've gone from CDs to downloads to even renting music. So you can listen, my students do this. They don't even own music anymore. They listen to it on Spotify and those things. The sales have gone down and down and down for the record labels. So then the question is, well, if you signed with a record label, what could they do for you? What could they do for you? Well, they could still make the record if you want them to. I mean, they've certainly got the facilities to do it. They could do that. They could probably get you better positioning on things like iTunes. They could probably do that. They could possibly get you exposure, maybe TV exposure, radio exposure. But mainly what they're doing today is they're putting new artists out on the road. They're touring them. Well, that's the job of a talent agent. So the record labels are really becoming glorified talent agents. And if you think about how they make money, since there's very little in recording, they are desperate for money and they're looking for ways. Well, in the past, with their artists, they would encourage the artist, they would really push them to tour. They wanted to go out and tour because that drove the sale of CDs. And so when the artist was out there, what they said is whatever money you make, that's yours to keep. And that's been the way the business has been run since the beginning, since they started doing this. Because that was the incentive for the artist to get out there. The artist would drive the sale of CDs and the record label made money from the CDs. Now they are realizing, okay, there is some money in live performance. How can we get some of that? And so they've come up with a new contract. I don't know if you know about this or not, but they're calling it a 360 deal. And what it is basically is they take a percent of everything that the artist earns. And they say, well, we're going to spend more time in development. You know, they come up with, you know, we're going to do this, do that. I'm going to tell you flat out, this is a bad deal for any artist. Have you noticed, this has been happening for years, have you noticed how the major artists, many major artists are leaving their record labels and starting their own labels? Have you noticed that? That's because when their contracts come up for renewal, the label says you're going to have to sign one of these 360 deals, and they're going, you're crazy. And I remember early on, the first one I heard about was, I remember Dolly Parton left her record label. And I thought, if Dolly Parton can't get a good deal, nobody can. You know, she's a genius at this. And so that's what we're seeing. And so I just tell my students, don't sign these things. And, you know, if people don't know better, they'll jump at them, not realizing what they're signing away. But they're basically giving the labels most of the money, which they did before. They took most of the money too. So number 6, I would ask you to consider, do you need a music publisher? Now, in the past, music publishers have been the connection between the songwriter and other artists, film directors, TV directors, really the only way to exploit songs, to get exposure for music. And of course the price that you pay is you have to turn the ownership of the song over to the publisher. Everybody's familiar with that, right? That's the way they've always done it. I think it goes all the way back to the beginning when songwriters were working under labels back in the early years of the 20th century, and they were employees of music publishers, not labels, music publishers, and they were working as work for hire, so that the label owned everything. I think that's really where it came from, and it's just stayed that way. So what I would consider I'd ask you to consider 3 things. First, what I would consider, if I were you, I would consider owning my own publishing company. You can do this for about $500. You can set up a publishing company, and if you don't know, I know an attorney that does this and does it all the time. And does it, and I would say to you, you want a music attorney to do this to be sure it's done correctly. But the nice thing about that, if you did decide to work with a publisher, then you could co-publish. Meaning, you as the songwriter, you know the split is 50-50, 50% the songwriter, 50% to the publisher. Well, if you own your own publishing company, as the songwriter, you get your 50%, then you split that other 50% with the publisher. Now, so you're co-publishing. Now, they might argue over the split, but anything over 1% is, good. The other thing is you don't lose control of your song, because you would also be splitting the ownership of your song. So that's one thing. The other thing I would urge you to do is consider exposing your songs yourself, and you can do this today. One of the best places to get noticed today is YouTube. It's amazing how many people are on YouTube looking for things. They're looking for things. Not only YouTube, but things like Reverb Nation, getting your music on Reverb Nation, Spotify, things like that. It really does work. People that are looking for music are not going necessarily through music publishers. They're out looking for it themselves. And I'll tell you, two of my students, I have two examples for you. Two of my students have had experience with this. One day, one of my students, who was a songwriter, one of my songwriters, got a call from a clothing company, from their home office, and they said, they were on, one of their guys was on Reverb Nation and heard one of his songs and thought this would be a great song to just have as music, in the stores. So he wanted to know if they could license the use of his song for about 6 months. And he came to me and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think I'd talk to him. I think this sounds good." And he said, I said, "Is there any restrictions on your side? Are they telling you anything?" And he talked to me and came back. He said, "No, they just want to use the song in their store." And I said, "Well, what are they willing to pay you?" He said, "Well, they offered me $3,000.
Yeah.
And I said, "Take it. Sign the contract and take it." So that happened. The other student, I have a student who graduated last year, and James Franco, you know that name, he's an actor and director, is making a new film right now. And one of his good friends, he was talking to him, and he said, "I would really like some new music for this film." And he said, we need to go find music, and we need to go out there and find, do you know anybody? And this guy said, "Well, I know this guy named Jake," was a friend of his. Well, Jake was my student. And he said, "Jake's a songwriter, I could call him and see if he's got anything." So he did. Well, Jake is working on a new album right now. And so he said, he told him, the guy said, "Well, would you just send the music up to me? I want to let James Franco hear it." So James likes the music. And so the question now is, it looks like Jake's going to get several songs placed in this new film and may do the music for the entire film. They're talking about it. So the way that happened was not through a music publisher. It's happening different ways. So I think the idea is it's really not needed like it was. And the third thing I would say is, if you do decide with a music publisher to work with a music publisher, then I would try for a licensing agreement. And here's the agreement I would ask for, is we can do the same split, 50-50 split, but I as the songwriter retain ownership of the song 100%. And I think you're going to find they're agreeable to that. They really don't have to have the song. And what that allows you to do is do whatever you want with a song. You license it to them for a specific use, and you can do whatever you want with a song. There are also licensing companies out there that are doing this, and I think the licensing companies may be the new music publishers. I think that may be what we're seeing. So I would look into that. And I would not give the rights of my song away unless I just had to. The last thing I want to talk to you about is, if you decide that you want a songwriting career, then I think you have to decide how you're going to transition into it. And I think it depends on the kind of career that you want. And there are different kinds. We always think of the full-time career, but you can be a songwriter as a part-time career. You can be a songwriter for just a hobby. It's just a hobby. Any of those are fine. You just have to decide what it is you want and then go that direction. I'm going to talk to you about what I tell my students. If your goal is to one day become a full-time songwriter, I'll tell you what I tell them. I don't think there's any value in starving for your art. I just don't think it's worth it. And so I tell them, don't dive in the deep end of the water and it's sink or swim, because it's going to put you under tremendous pressure. to make ends meet. What I would do is I would start out, I'd have a full-time job, and then I would start working on my career in the evenings. That's actually the hardest part of it, because you guys know when you come in from work at night, you're tired, you want to rest, you maybe want to watch TV. What you got to do is get up and go play. You got to get out there and market yourself and be out in the market. So you do this until you begin to make money with your songwriting career. Once you get up to a point, if you want to continue, then you could trade your full-time job in for a part-time job. Try to find a job that offers benefits. Some of them do. And then you would have more time to work on your career. A lot of people say this is ideal because I've got a part-time job that's pays all my bills. I know I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to sell anything this month with my songwriting career, and I'm still going to be fine. And they like that kind of security, but it gives them more time to work on their career. If you decide you want to go further and you want to transition into a full-time career, then I would say let your songwriting grow. Let that career grow up where it's almost supporting you, where you think, okay, I could probably get by on the money that this is doing, and then let go of the part-time job, and that'll give you more time to promote your songwriting career, which should earn more money. So I think it's very possible to do it. And I would encourage you to think about this. If you can do this on your own, then you don't need a record label, and you don't need a music publisher to be successful. And this is part of a new way of thinking. If you can do this on your own, you'll retain the copyrights to your songs. You'll also retain the sound recordings, which the labels traditionally owned. You'll retain those to all of your music. If you're not paying large amounts of money to labels or to publishers in terms of fees, then the lower production costs of today, it actually allows you to sell music for less but earn more, because you're keeping the majority of the money instead of the record labels and the publishers. So I would say, I would encourage you to take charge of your career, because I am telling you, you can do it.
Wow.
Thanks.